Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual. Today, we're going to do our next episode of a mixed haul. It's mixed because I went around to some thrift stores, picked up some stuff there. I had a private sale off of Facebook Marketplace and Kijiji, so I got some stuff there. And I also bought two items new. All right, so um, it's post Christmas now, and um, things will start to pick up again because it's a bit slow during the Christmas season when you go to the thrift shops because a lot of people aren't working or on their holidays and stuff doesn't get put up on the shelves as quickly. So, but I did manage to find a bunch of Blu-rays, some DVDs, some books, and some video games. So this will be the first time you'll see video games in any of my thrift store hauls or mixed hauls or private sale hauls or anything like that because I had sold a few weeks ago a large amount of books, um, which put a good amount of money in my bank account, and I used a large chunk of it to buy a a Nintendo Switch, um, so that me and my son can play some video games, right? Um, so the thing about the Switch is that you got to buy the video games, right? So the Switch is pretty expensive. It was like over $400, and then it's kind of just a paperweight unless you have like games to put on it. You can download games off the internet, off their their e-commerce store or whatever. You can do it that way, which is cool. You open up an account and then you pay for that type of stuff, and it gets put on your Switch, and then you go get like a small um, flash drive or whatever, the mini ones. Um, and you can save a bunch of games on that as well. But I don't know, maybe I'm old school. I'm not sure. I prefer to actually have the cartridge. I prefer to actually have the actual game, the physical game myself, rather than it being on some server uh, from Nintendo, and then they got to make sure they remember who I am and that kind of thing. And although it probably is much easier to do it that way because then the games are basically um, on your Switch, and you just scroll through what you want to play. You don't have to pull one cartridge out and put another cartridge in, and pull one cartridge out, put another cartridge in. I bet you there's a software um, workaround for that where you can take um, the cartridges and physically put them on you know your uh, your hard drive inside the Wii. I keep calling it a Wii. I apologize. Inside the Switch. There's probably a workaround for that. Uh, but I haven't investigated it yet. So if there is I may use it. I mean, depending on the legality of it, I'm not sure how legal it is. But they should have that option that you can transfer a game that you've bought because you bought it from them on a cartridge. You should be able to have the option of transferring it onto your Switch and not having to pull cartridges out and put cartridges in all the time. It makes for a pain in the ass, right? So. Um, but I guess that's kind of like to motivate you towards their e-commerce store and just download these games and put them on your Switch without having an actual physical cartridge because it probably costs them less money to do it that way as well. And it is more convenient for you, but then you got to trust Nintendo not to forget who you are, and then maybe your little a mini SD card breaks or whatever, and all your games that are on it. So you should be able to download them again off the website. But what if the website doesn't remember who you are, right? There's been numerous times where I've downloaded software off the internet, you know, whatever program or whatever, because they don't give you physical copies of the programs anymore. You just go on the internet and you download that program, and then they give you a key to to open the program. But then if you lose that key or um, then you got to try to figure out who you are in order whether you can continue using that or do you have to buy the program again, right? You know what I mean? So it's a pain in the ass. I'd rather have the actual physical thing for it. And so that I bought two games for the Switch, and my son and I have been playing those two games so far, and I'll pick up more. I don't think I'll ever download anything off of the e-commerce site. I'd just rather have the physical. And secondarily to that is, let's say you get sick of the Switch and you've bought all these games that are physically on your Switch. It's done through your own account, so those games are identified to you, and then you sell your Switch. Um, you just wasted all that money on your games, right? Or is it that you can transfer those games to other people if you sell the Switch? I don't think you can, right? It wouldn't make any economical business sense for Nintendo to allow you to do that, right? So basically, you're going to have a whole bunch of games online attached to your, um, username and password, and they may be on, the little SD card or whatever. And maybe you'll give that SD card, but are you going to give that SD card to the person that you sell your Switch to? Because doesn't that SD card attach to your account online, right? I'm not sure of the logistics of it yet. Like I said, I just bought the Switch, so I'm still investigating it. But it seems to me that if you do decide that you don't want to play the Switch anymore and you want to sell the Switch, you can sell it, but you won't be able to sell any of the games that you've downloaded off the internet, right? I don't think you'll be able to do that. It would be like trying to sell, you buy a DVD or a Blu-ray and then you get a digital code for it, and you can give those away or sell those digital codes to other people, but they're the ones that go get them, right? You just give them the code or the password for it and they go get them. If you've already went and got them, there's no way you can transfer that film over to another person if you decide you're going to sell your Blu-ray player, right? You know what I mean? Um, you're not going to sell your account to another person so that they have all your movies, right? Nobody's going to buy your account with all these online movies, right? So, um, but you can, if you buy the physical disc, you can sell that disc, right? You can sell that. So you recoup some of your money. So let's say you go out and buy a Switch and then you decide, I don't like this. It was like a, impulse purchase or something like that. And then you bought 3 or 4 games. You realize that, I'm not into this gaming as much as some other people are. I think I'm just going to sell it. Well, now you have the actual physical games that you can sell as well, right? You don't have, them downloaded off the internet. So the actual physical game is important as well to have. I mean, if you're going to spend $60 on a download code to download it onto your Wii, or you're going to get the actual physical copy of the game for the same price, you might as well get the physical copy of it, because that way, like I said, you can resell it later, right? So if you decide you don't want to play the Switch anymore, right? All right. So, anyways, I'm ranting. That rant is over. So basically, I have 2 Nintendo Switch games. So you're going to see more of those probably in future videos now. It was between the Switch or the PS5 that I was thinking about buying, and I went with the Switch because the versatility of it, right? You can actually bring it with you around with you, and I thought that would be cool for my son if he wants to. I can bring that around, and if we're over at friends and he's kind of bored, he can play the Switch or whatever, right? So play the Switch and instead of sitting there and watching a whole bunch of adults talk or whatever if there's no kids around for him to play with me. So anyway, so it's more versatile. That's why, and playing the games on the actual, 60-inch TV that I have is quite fun as well. So, you know, other consoles, I guess, may be at higher resolutions, but the resolutions that I see with the Nintendo Switch are fine by me. They're really fun to play. All right. So that's all right. So let's get into this. All right. So first we'll do the books. We'll get the books out of the way first, and then we'll go on to all the movies and video games. All right. So the first book I picked up was Joy Kogawa's Obasan. All right. Now this is part of the Puffin Classic, so you'll get like, this design now. This is the new design of the Puffins, which are um, the children's section of Penguin or the Penguin Classics. You got the Puffin Classics, so they're more brightly colored. They're not black, and it's all about children's. You can get Alice, and, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and all the classic, you know, um, children's books in um, this type of design from the Puffin Classics, right? And it's interesting they added Obasan to that classics list. It's a Canadian book, actually, from a Canadian writer of Japanese descent. and she writes about World War II in this book. It's basically a children's book about the like a 5 or 6 year old's um, view on the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II. Um, so she ends up losing her mother. She ends up in an internment camp with her aunt, and anyways, it goes through all of that stuff from the point of view of like a 5 or 6 year old girl, right? So it's quite an interesting read, um, and it's part of Canadian history, so that's another good part. I'm not sure why the Canadian government thought that Canadian citizens who were of Japanese descent would like become terrorists for the Japanese. I'm not sure why they would think that. I'm not sure. Does that happen? I mean, if I'm if I'm, let's say, an American GI and I'm in the Philippines, um, and I have a son in the Philippines who stays with his mother, right? And then he immigrates to the United States, and the Philippines and the United States decide to have a conflict. Would I intern him? I'm not sure. Wouldn't where he lived be the place of importance for him? I'm not sure. He's a bit of paranoid, I think, but I don't know. I've never been into the corridors of power or what they're thinking, but it's. I mean, decades later, it's come off as like, you know, what the hell were the Canadian government thinking of in turning their own people just because they had a Japanese origin? Anyway, um, so that's what that book is about. All right, and it came out. It was published in 1981. All right, pretty heavy subject for children, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't actually read the book. That was just a synopsis of what the book is about. I haven't actually read the book, so I'm not sure how she treated that whole thing on whether she's telling it like a a young adult or a teenager who's reading it would understand. I'm assuming so because it ended up in the Puffin Classics, and not all books end up in the Puffin Classics, right? So, right. So next up is Six Memos for the Next Millennium by Italo Calvino. All right, Italo Calvino is an Italian writer, and this is basically his lecture, or there were supposed to be 6 lectures, but only 5 of them were written uh, for, I think, Harvard. Was it Harvard? I think Harvard invited him to do a set of lectures, um, and these were the lectures that he was going to do at Harvard, but he ended up dying. So they weren't ever, performed, or it didn't happen. So what happened was they put it in book form instead. All right. So there's actually 2 versions of this book. All right. It's called Six Memos for the Next Millennium, but there's 2 versions. There's an 80s version of it, which is this one. This is the one that's translated by what's his name in the 1980s. Patrick uh, Krieg, Krieg, Creagh. He translated it, and then there was another translation, actually more recent translation of this. I think I wrote it down. Um, this one's the one by Patrick Krieg, and there's another one by Jeffrey Brock. All right, um, that was done later. I don't know which one is better. Um, Maybe it doesn't really matter. But anyway, so it's basically 6 lectures by Calvino, and it's nonfiction. It's about literature, the defense of literature, and how important literature is, and so on and so forth. Um, so it's my understanding it's an extremely good read. So I'll probably read it at some point. All right. So that's Six Memos for the Next Millennium. Next up is a 1986 book by Coetzee called Foe. All right. This is a Penguin as well. Penguin is really good at putting out really good books. All right. And their classic series, Penguin Classic series, is like, the books if you want to read on the history of literature and other subjects, right? So anyway, so this is Foe. It's a novel, all right. It um, it's written by Coetzee, who's won what it was, the Nobel Prize for Literature, I think. He's won so many awards anyway. So this book is the retelling of the Robinson Crusoe story, but from a woman's point of view. So basically, what happens is Crusoe gets stranded on the island, like he does with his man Friday or whatever, right? Um, and they've been on the island for a good amount of time, and then a woman who's on a ship heading over to the Americas um, from Europe because she's looking for her daughter who's been kidnapped or taken, and she thinks that her daughter is in the Americas, and so she's taken, and then she ends up getting thrown off the boat or kicked off the boat. I don't know exactly what happens, but she ends up off the boat and she ends up on the island where Robinson Crusoe is. And she's on the island with Robinson Crusoe and Friday for like a year. And then they end up getting rescued. And then she's back in, I guess it's England or whatever. And she's trying to tell that story. So she like tries to hire a writer because she tries to write it herself and it doesn't work. So she hires a writer who ends up not wanting to tell her story, but more wanting to tell Robinson Crusoe's story or something along those lines. Um, so it sounds like a really interesting book. And Coetzee is a great writer, one of the best 20th century writers. So, um, and you can't go wrong with any of his books. So that will be on the list of books. There's just too many books to read, right? So um, you got to pick and choose which ones you read. And right now, I'm slowly going through Kiss of the Spider Woman, and there's so many other books to read. Like I've read hundreds of books in my lifetime, maybe even thousands. Yeah, probably in the thousands. Um, and there's still more books to read. I mean, there's a never-ending supply. Let's put it that way. All right, so that's the Coetzee book called Foe. All right. Next up is a William Maxwell book. All right, and it was published in 1979, and it's called So Long, See You Tomorrow. All right, and this one is a fiction book novel, and it surrounds a murder. There's these two families, and there's pressure put on the two families, and one of the family member of one kills a family member of the other. And then you jump ahead 50 years, and the son of the man that was killed was best friends, I think if I remember correctly, with the son of the man who killed his father. And they kind of lost touch, and he wasn't there to support his best friend or whatever after his father murdered his father or whatever, right? So, anyways, it jumps ahead 50 years and it goes through all the guilt and everything else. So, it's quite an interesting thing on how, let's say, a murder in a family affects its members and the members of the family that did the murdering, right? So, um, and it's not a huge book, it's just 130 pages, right? So, it's quite a brisk read, and you can actually sit down and read it maybe in a couple of sessions, depending on how long of a reader you are. If you read at night in bed and you read 3 pages and you fall asleep, it'll probably take you longer. But some people read in bed to fall asleep. So, um, but if you're sitting on your lazy boy in the living room and sitting down and reading, spend a few hours reading, you can breeze through it in 2 or 3 sittings, whatever, right? So, all right, so that's So Long, See You Tomorrow. And the last book is a book by Jeff Weiss and Evan McGarvey, and it is about rap music, hip hop music, Tupac versus Biggie. All right, an illustrated history of rap's greatest battle, they call it, and basically it goes over the lives of Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur, and they end up being friends at one time, and then you know Tupac gets gunned down, and then 6 to 9 months later, Biggie gets shot and killed as well. So, and they never solved either one of the murders. Uh, but some in one camp blame the other camp for killing Tupac, and then a lot of people look at the Biggie killing as a retaliation for the Tupac killing, but nobody really knows. But these guys decided, I guess, they wanted to sell a book, and so they go over basically the the two guys' lives, what their importance are, and how they were friends at one time, and then they became um, not so friendly, and all that story around that. It does not give you any information on who killed who because nobody really knows, but it's basically, and it's very visually, it's almost like a coffee table book um, that you can put on your coffee table. It's meant to be read. It's not like super crazy in depth or anything, but it has a lot of images in it as well as writing, right? So it's a really nice coffee table book if you like hip hop. Um, and the information inside it does give you a little bit more of a an insight into what was going on at the time and the two men and their crews or whatever and everything. So uh, I'll probably end up selling it. Uh, like I said, I really only keep uh, leather bound versions of books that I've read that I was quite impressed with, and then the Everyman Library and the Modern Library are the ones that I collect, and that's basically it. Right? So because of space. All right, so those are the books. All right, Tupac versus Biggie, and that one came out in 2013. All right, so those are the books. Let's move on to the movies. All right, so let's get these memos out of the way here. All right, so I went to a couple of thrift stores, and I managed to find one, two, three, four, five, six DVDs. So we'll go through those first. All right. First is a film by Sidney Lumet, all right, or Lumet, depending on how you pronounce it. All right. It's Running on Empty. It's uh, it's basically these two, Judd Hirsch and can't remember her name, uh, Judd Hirsch and Christina Leahy. All right, and they have a son who's River Phoenix. All right, River Phoenix, and basically they end up like blowing up. Uh, like back in the day, they were like domestic terrorists for a good cause kind of thing, and they blew up a building or something, and then they went on the run from the FBI, and they've been running ever since with their kids. Their kids have been growing up on the road as they leave one state to go to another state to start a new identity and get a job, and then they get found out, and then they take off again and going. And River Phoenix is getting to be like a young man, and he's sick of this anonymous life, this traveling life, and he has to make a choice between the family he's known all of his life and a more sedentary lifestyle, staying in one city. There's a love interest that propels him to do that, if I remember correctly. Right. So, um, and he's got to make that tough choice because they're never going to stop running because once they do, they're going to be, thrown in jail for the rest of their lives or whatever. Right. Um, so it's that's the crux of the movie, and that's the greatness of this Lumet film or Lumet film, right, is that that bond you have with your family, but the need for you to like break that bond in order to become an adult and lead your own life, right? Because he's basically running around with his parents because of what his parents did, not what he did, and that type of life nobody would choose unless we were forced to choose, right? So it's like he's got to sacrifice his family because he probably won't see them ever again because they're always going to be on the run, right? And his own life, you know what I mean? So it's like that pull, you know what I mean? And that pull and Lumet does or Lumet. What do you call him? Sidney Lumet? I don't think he's French, so I guess you wouldn't call him Lumet, right? So um uh so you that pull is the greatness of the film and he does it really well, right? And Lumet is a guy that I collect. He's one of the directors that I collect, and this type of film is the reason why. One of the reasons why. I mean, he's done so many great films, right? So, um, all right. So that's Running on Empty from 1988. Next up is 1960 film starring Elizabeth Taylor. And if you've ever watched any of my videos, you know that Elizabeth Taylor is one of my all-time favorite actors. All right, and she just lights up the screen in almost everything that she's ever done. Right, and this one she plays kind of like a. Would you call her a, a hooker? I don't think you would, right? She was promiscuous, but she didn't really, charge for it. Let's put it that way. But the main character is the Lawrence Harvey character, if I remember correctly, who's a love interest of hers, and but she's like this individualistic um, woman who sleeps with whoever she wants and everything. And it's a bit taboo during the time that this came out, right? That opening up of the sexuality of women and the non-control of it, where they can basically act like men if they so choose. Um, and uh, It's quite an eye opener at the time, let's put it that way. Now, this was directed by Daniel Mann, who directed a bunch of films, but a lot of them, this is the only one that people consider as great. So, and I think the reason why they consider it great, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. Daniel Mann doesn't come up on the radar when it comes to great directors. So, um, but this film does, and I think the reason why is because of her performance, right? So if you want to see a film on why I think Elizabeth Taylor is just stunning on film, this one is one when she was younger that that's good, and then another one where she just she just stuns everybody with her that I don't know, like visceral badness or whatever. In who's afraid of Virginia Woolf. Watch that one as well, and you'll see what I mean by Elizabeth Taylor. All right, so. Um, and she won an Oscar for her performance in this, and she's won numerous Oscars, but I think this is her best role of all the films that she was in. This is the best one. So it's called Butterfield 8. I wish I could find it on Blu-ray, but I just found it after collecting films for like know years. I've just found it on DVD. Because I don't really buy things new all that often, right? So. All right, so that is Butterfield 8. Next up is Take This Waltz from 2011. It's basically a romantic triangle, romantic uh, comedy film. It's Canadian. It's directed by Sarah Polley. And Sarah Polley is another um, woman in the film industry that's quite impressive. She has a great acting pedigree. I mean, my two favorite films that she was in as an actress are The Sweet Hereafter. If you haven't seen that film, see it. It's quite powerful. And the remake of Dawn of the Dead, which I actually, she's the reason why I actually like Dawn of the Dead, the remake, better than the original Romero film, right? So she has that magnetism on film. Um, and then she gets into directing, and she directs Away from Her, which uh, was a film about Alzheimer's, dementia, um, which was quite powerful. And then she did this film, all right, which is called Take This Waltz, and it's basically about a woman who is in a 5-year marriage with a man that she loves, but she ends up meeting another guy who starts having her go astray, and she realizes that she doesn't love her husband; she loves this man, and she ends up divorcing her husband for this guy. So um, it's basically the atypical thing that happens to women. I mean, not being female, even saying the word female is insulting to some women. But anyways, not being a woman. All right. Um, I can only speculate or whatever, but basically, I think women may end up going through this more than men do, and Polly captures it really well in this film. All right, in this film, she captures it really well on that. Um, uh, where men seem to have this, a lot of men have a sense of duty, so they'll stay in a marriage even though, um, just for the kids, and maybe women do too. I don't know. This is a generalization, but um, uh, women seem to, well, isn't it true that most breakups are instituted by women, not by men, right? Men have a tendency to stay in relationships longer than women if they're unhappy. So I don't know. I may be putting my foot in my mouth talking about this, but basically that feeling in the woman in the film is, she loves her husband. That's why she married him. But then she sees somebody that she's attracted to, and that desire is stronger for the new guy than it is for her husband, and therefore the right thing to do is to leave her husband and go with the new guy, right? But the ending of the film was a bit, um, ambivalent, but you could read into the end of the film that maybe, um, in the future that would happen to her again, right? Where she's now with the new guy, but the new guy she's been with for, let's say, a decade or something, or 10 years or 5 years or whatever, and then she meets another guy, and that one sparks that desire in her, and then she moves on from that guy to the next guy, right? So it's polygamous polygamous monogamy. Polygamous monogamy, is that such a thing? Where you're monogamous with the person that you're with, but you will leave them to be with another person. Um, you don't have any, let's say, staying power in a marriage or whatever, right? So, um, polygamous monogamy. I don't know. Anyways, um, it's an extremely interesting film, and, um, usually, how a lot of men will shy away from romance films or love films, um, and when they do watch them, it's usually with their significant other, because their significant other wants to watch that film. Well, this film, um, was quite interesting, and it'll be quite interesting to you if you're male, right? So, um, and Seth Rogen does a good job in this film, and so does Michelle Williams and Luke Kirby, who plays the new love interest or whatever, right? So anyway, and Sarah Silverman is in it too, the comedian. Anyway, so that's Take This Waltz, all right, and after that is a Criterion. I have this in my collection already, all right. It has not come out on Blu-ray in the Criterion collection that I know of, all right. So if you're gonna pick up this film by Kevin Smith, you're gonna get it in a DVD. I don't think it's on Blu-ray, all right. I mean, at least in the Criterion collection it is, all right. So, um, it's basically a film about her and Ben Affleck. What's her name? Keep forgetting her name. She's been in Joey Lauren Adams, right? So her name's Joey Lauren Adams. She was in a bunch of different films by Kevin Smith. She was in Mallrats, which is probably her other famous film with Kevin Smith. But in this film, she plays a lesbian, and Ben Affleck pays plays her like one of her good friends, but he is actually in love with her and tries to convince her to come into a relationship with him. But obviously, if she's a lesbian, she's not going to do it, right? So it's that tension, when a man loves someone who doesn't return that love. There's a tension there. There's an ache in the man, and it doesn't necessarily even mean the need that the woman be a lesbian. It's just that she's not interested, right? So, um, you'll still get that feeling inside, right? So Kevin Smith does a really good job with this. Now, this isn't my favorite Kevin Smith film. All right, my favorite Kevin Smith film is probably, well, he's made so many that are good, but I think actually, uh, crap, I'll put it here. It'll pop into my head. Dogma. Dogma's probably my favorite Kevin Smith film. All right, Mallrats, a very close second, and Clerks. But I like Clerks 2 better because of what's her name? I'll put the name down here. She's got that something on film like Christina Ricci does, or Sarah Polley, or Elizabeth Taylor. Uh, she has that. I don't know what it is on film, but she has that magnetism on film. Um, anyway, so uh, this is number 75 in the Criterion Collection. All right, and it's a common one. So what the Criterion Collection does is they'll put out a lot of art films, a lot of foreign films, a lot of older films that are difficult to find. In fact, a lot of the films, that are considered, the greatest world films of all time, you'll find in the Criterion Collection. You won't find them anywhere else, right? So they were known for that since the 80s, right? So, but what they'll do every once in a while is they'll put out more of a mainstream film so that it sells. And when they do put out a mainstream film, it sells really well in the Criterion Collection. All right, so um, and they take that money and they invest it into putting out films that might not have a very large audience for, but the film is a great film, and the collection wants you to have access to it, right? So um, they just love film, right? And if it's a French film from the 1940s that is not in print anywhere, and they can put it out, and they'll sell this in order to get the recoup the money in order to put out that other film that they know isn't going to sell very well. That's what they've done, and they've done it historically. Now, recently, what seems to be happening though is they're doing this more and more, and less of the other ones. But I could be wrong. I would, I'd have to do the research into it. But it seems to me when the Criterion announces each one of its new, monthly lists, not a majority, but more frequently it ends up being more mainstream films. All right, so um, it seems like the boutique cinema labels, the Arrow, the Criterions, the Kino Lobers, Scream Factory, these type of labels are moving more into the mainstream, where the studios would usually put out these films themselves. They're licensing them to third parties, and the third parties are putting them out on the next generation. So I'm just still waiting for this to come out on a Blu-ray, right? So you'll get a DVD of something, and then um, Paramount or whatever isn't putting the film out onto Blu-ray, but then a boutique cinema label will approach Paramount and say, give us a license for it, and we'll put it out on Blu-ray, or we'll put it out on the next, which is a 4K or whatever, right? So you'll see that happen a lot, but for some reason this one hasn't jumped it that I know of. I may be incorrect. You may be able to find a Blu-ray on this, but in the Criterion Collection, I don't think you're going to find it. I think we're still stuck with a DVD. Not really that you're stuck, because the DVD quality of Criterion is usually pretty high. So, and I enjoy watching DVDs. I've watched them all my life, and so that upgrade to Blu-ray or 4K isn't as important to me as it may be to younger people that are used to, let's say, Blu-ray or 4K, and then when they look at a DVD and try to watch it, they go, "Oh man, that's just so awful to look at on TV." But if you've grown up with DVDs, that's your standard, and everything else is kind of like dessert or whatever, right? So, all right, so this was one of Smith's best film, but it's in the Criterion Collection, I think, more for the sales than it is of the greatness of the film. All right, because Dogma is greater than this film. Mallrats is greater than this film. Clerks and Clerks 2 is greater than this film. So um, it's up there, but it's not his greatest film, right? So if I was to choose any film by Kevin Smith to put into the Criterion Collection, it would probably be Clerks, which was his first film, and because that was quite an impressive film on a very small budget. Um, so, anyways, all right. So that enough with Kevin Smith and Chasing Amy. Next up after that is a 1955 film. This one is directed by Delbert Mann, and it's called Marty. And it's probably Ernest Borgnine's best performance that I've come across so far. This is basically he's like what is he? A car salesman? I can't remember. What is he? No, I think he's a butcher. So he's a butcher and he's middle aged and he still hasn't found a wife. And the reason why is because he's super shy, right? And he's very uncomfortable around people of the opposite sex. So he's still single. I mean, he's a successful butcher. He's a good man. He's a loving man, but he just hasn't met that right person because of his shyness. And then um, she comes along, and she's you know as shy as he is, and somehow the stars align and everything, and it happens, and it's uh, when they do get together, it's extremely satisfying on film because shy people um, don't get they want what they want a lot of the times, right? So when you see somebody that's just good and they deserve it, and then they get what they deserve, it's satisfying. And this is one of the great 1950s films. All right, so if you haven't seen this, watch this. It's a really really good film, and it's another film that a guy can watch um, with his wife or significant other or alone because Borgnine's uh, you know uh, acting in this film is extremely good. All right. Okay. So that's Marty, and last in the ones I picked up at thrift stores is called Loud, Quiet, Loud, a film about the Pixies. All right. So the Pixies were what an '80s alternative rock, punk band, um, and they were never super successful. But just like word of mouth is almost everything over time they've gained and gained and gained in stature because so many other successful bands have mentioned them as an influence on their music, right? So basically, they kind of like alternative punk rock, and basically they put out what they put out. They put out "Come On Pilgrim," which is their first EP, if I remember correctly, and then they put out "Doolittle," and what was the other one? Um, Surfer Rosa, and then Doolittle. All right, so and then they broke up in 1993. All right, and but then a decade later, around 2004, um, the respect gained by the Pixies and their music, and the spread of how great the band is, I guess motivated them. Black Francis, Joey Santiago, Kim Deal, although there was a like a revolving uh, there's a revolving number of women bassists in this band, right? But the first one was Kim Deal, right? And then David Lovering on drums, right? And so they reunited in 2004, and this documentary is about that uh, reunification or reuniting of the band in 2004 and what came about that broke them up in the first place and how they reconciled or whatever and came back, and they're still playing music today if I remember correctly, right? And they put out those first that EP and those two uh, first two albums. You know, I would put them up in the top 200, right? Of greatest albums of all time. But then when they came back in 2004, they put out 4 or 5 albums afterwards. But when I listen to the Pixies, I always listen to that early stuff, and I haven't listened to the later stuff. Plus, it hasn't come across my visage or my desk or whatever for me to actually pick it up and listen to it. I mean, used wise, I mean, because I rarely buy stuff new, right? I do buy stuff new, but I prefer to find it used because too many times in the history of me collecting stuff, whether it's magazines, books, um, sports cards, uh, you name it. I've bought stuff new, and then within weeks or months, I come across the exact same thing for like 1/10 of the cost, and I go, "Oh man, I just spent $30 on that, and this is like $2." It just it irks me the wrong way. Let's put it that way. So I usually have the patience just to wait. I will buy things new, but I'll usually only buy things new when, I have an abundance of extra money or whatever, right? So I try to keep my budget pretty low. All right, so this is called Loud Quiet, and the reason why it's called Loud Quiet Loud is that's a good description of the way that they play music. They'll play it loud, and then they'll get soft, and then they'll play it loud again, right? And so so that's why they called that film about the Pixies Loud Quiet Loud. All right, so that's the last of those DVDs from the thrift stores. And the next place I went to find some stuff is um, on private sales on Facebook Marketplace and um, Kijiji, and I found 3 Blu-ray sets and 1 Switch film. So let's do the Switch film first. Okay, so this is Battle for Bikini Bottom. All right, um, rehydrated, and it's for the Nintendo Switch. All right. Um, it basically is a fun game. But it's called Rehydrated because it's an older game, right? It came out in 2000, and I wrote it down, 2003, and this is a 2020 game. All right, so they call it Rehydrated because they reissued it um, for the Switch platform and others, right? So, but basically, originally it was called Battle for Bikini Bottom, and it was made for the PS2, GameCube, and Xbox and Game Boy Advance back then. But then they reissued it for now for Windows PCs, the Switch, the PS4, and the Xbox and mobile devices. All right, so um, it's a fun game. I picked it up more because my son really likes SpongeBob. And basically, there's 2 versions of the game really. If you want to play single player, um, you play in a world where you're running around trying to stop all of these robots from taking over Bikini Bottom, and your job is to run around, pick up socks for Patrick and golden spatulas to get to different areas, and you pick up all these spatulas and all these other items, and then you end up fighting Plankton at the end of it all, right? Because Plankton is the one that's sending out all these robots, right? Uh, but then there's a second game if you want to play multiplayer, and that game is more of a run around and fight robot game where you're jumping from islands to islands and fighting robots to to get to I think it's Squidward actually to get to Squidward and fight Squidward or whatever, right? So it's like 2 different games in one. If you want to play multiplayer, you're going to play one game. If you want to play single player, you're going to play the main you know uh, game of the game, right? So um, both are fun to play, but they're not amazingly great. I picked this up used for $30. So the, the funny thing I found about Switch games, and I don't know if it's true for other platforms, but for Switch games, they really hold their pricing, right? Like the difference between buying it new off of Amazon or buying it used off of, let's say, Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, the difference is like minimal, right? Like games are going, 70, 80, 90, 60, 70, 80, $90 on Amazon new, and then you look for it used in the secondary market, and it might only be $10 less, right? A $60 game might be 50, or an $80 game might be 60 or 65 or 70, right? So, I mean, I don't know how anybody sells them. Now, this one is like $50, and I got it for 30. All right, so that's a good. If I remember correctly, it was like $55, $50. Then you include the tax or whatever. It's around that, and so use 30. It seemed like a purchase that's worthy to purchase, right? But if I'm looking for other games of on the Switch, and I'm online looking at secondary pricing, something that's like 69.99 new might be, like $60 on Facebook Marketplace. And I'm going, why would I, you know, I I know there's going to be tax on it, so something that's $70 on Amazon might be, 75, $77 once you purchase it or whatever. And if you have the free delivery or whatever, right? So, but I don't understand why anybody would pay $60 for a game that for $10 or $15 more they can just get new and they don't have to worry about whether the game is corrupt or damaged or whatever used, right? Because every time you buy something used, um, most people are honest, but there are some people that either don't realize because they don't check or they do, and they're selling you something that they know doesn't work properly, thinking that you'll bring it home, and then especially if they be wary of people that want to meet you in other places other than where they live. All right, like okay, I'll meet you at this grocery store. I'll meet you here, so that once they leave and you have the item and they have your money, you go back and realize it doesn't work. There's no way for you to really um, do anything about that, right? I mean, you may have their name off of Facebook Marketplace, but Kijiji doesn't really matter. It's not going to go anywhere with it, right? So uh, it's better to buy new if you have the money because then you don't have to worry about it. If it's damaged or something, you just send it back and you get a new one, right? But you know it's going to work, right? So buying things used, you don't know 100% sure that you're going to get what you pay for, right? But with Switch games, man, they keep their pricing because everybody's selling stuff for the Nintendo Switch at almost the same price as you can buy it off of, buy it new, right? So I think most of the time when you come across games that I've picked up, unless the pricing is like 60% or less of what it is new, right? I mean, if it's $100 game and it's 70 used, I may, do it because $30 gap is worth it, right? But a $10 gap between new and used, just um, I would rather just buy the new one. So I don't know how anybody really. I wonder if people think that way, same as me, and then they just don't pick those games up. But when I go on, I see these games being sold at those prices. So I guess uh, I guess you can sell them at almost new prices used, right? So anyway, so that's Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. It's a fun game. I wouldn't say it's like a 10 on 10 game. I would put it more on like a 6.57 on 10 game. But my son likes it because he likes SpongeBob, right? And that was the main reason for that purchase. All right, so that was one purchase I did. The second purchase, private purchase I did, I picked up these. I picked up the 2016 film by Duncan Jones called Warcraft. Now, this was a really fun film to watch. I really enjoyed this. The CGI in it was good, and the storyline was good. And a lot of times, that doesn't happen for movies based on video games, right? So, but this one I found really good. Now, a lot of people said they didn't like it much, but I really enjoyed it. And the problem with other people saying they didn't like it much is this was supposed to be like a trilogy or at least two movies because the ending of this movie it stopped in the middle of the story, right? You know what I mean? There's supposed to be another movie after this that continues with the story, and they never made it because this one wasn't popular enough to justify making the second film. But if you can understand that this film is going to end and the story isn't going to be fully told, and you can enjoy it for what it is an extremely enjoyable film. The first time I watched this was on a streaming service, and I went, "Wow, I'm really impressed with that. I wonder when the next film is going to come out." Then realized that they're not going to make a second film because this one kind of bombed, right? So, but this is the Best Buy exclusive steelbook of the film. All right, so um, it's nice. I really enjoy having steelbooks in my collection, and I will upgrade Blu-rays to steelbook Blu-rays anytime I get if I can find those steelbooks, for a reasonable price, not like $30 or whatever, maybe like 10, that kind of thing, right? Um, I will upgrade. So I actually don't have this film yet, so it kind of um, I didn't have a need to upgrade the Blu-ray because it didn't have it. And this is a Blu-ray DVD combo, So I now have the Blu-ray and the DVD, which is awesome, right? So that's Warcraft. It's based on, you know, the video game, right? And next up is basically the Riddick collection, all right, on Blu-ray. Now I have this on DVD, so when the gentleman that had the Warcraft also had this on sale, I picked this up as well. So I picked these three things up for $15. All right, so this is the Chronicles of Riddick, Pitch Black, and um, the third film. What was the third film? Pitch Black, the Chronicles of Riddick, and Dark Fury. Yeah, that's right. Dark Fury. All right. So it's weird the way this is put. It says Vin Diesel Riddick collection, and then it just shows Pitch Black and the Chronicles of Riddick here. It doesn't say the third one, which is Dark Fury. But all three Blu-rays are in this. It's the trilogy. It's not just the first two films, right? It's all three of the films, but they make it look like it's only two films, and then they have a sticker here that says no, this is three films. So I don't know who screwed that up, but anyways, you get the three Blu-rays um, for all three of the films, and then there was a fourth film that came out later, and that's Riddick, and so we have that one as well. So now with these two, I have all the Riddick films, right? I don't know if this came out in a four-pack of films because I haven't seen it, so that's the reason why I picked this up. And it's funny. Okay, here's another reason. Here's a good example. If you're a fan of slipcases, like there's this saying in the film collecting thing, no slip, no dip, meaning you won't buy it unless it has a slip cover to it, right? So if you saw it like this, you wouldn't buy it, but if you had this on top of it, you would buy it, right? No slip, no dip. I don't know why people. I don't really care about these things. They're nice to have, but if you are going to have them and you just put them naked on your shelf, uh, I'm not sure why you think these slip covers. I mean, the main purpose of the slip cover is to protect, the Blu-ray case, right? I mean, that's the main reason. I mean, there's an advertising appeal to it. It advertises it as well, um, but when you put this in a plastic, sometimes it gets more damaged, so they end up putting these slip covers over them to protect it. But it's more of a marketing ploy or whatever. But anyway, so if you do have these and you don't protect them, they do disintegrate over time. All right, and here's a perfect example. All right, I don't know if the camera will pick this up or not, but here it looks new, it looks okay. But then you look on the inside of it. All right, now do you see it? Hopefully, I'm giving you the good angle. See this section here? See how it's browning and becoming brittle? It means all the moisture that was in the paper is leaving. All right, and when the paper dries, it becomes brittle and it'll just break apart. And it's already starting a bit right up at the top, right? Um, so if you notice that browning, it happens with books. It happens with anything that paper is involved, and it's the reaction to a dry environment or air. Basically, over time, air will rob the moisture from books, right? That's why they eventually fall apart, right? So you're going to get the same thing with this because this is basically paper. I mean, there's a coating on the outside of it, but on the inside, you'll see the browning, and it makes it look ugly, basically, right? So that's another reason why if you have slip covers and you want to protect your slip covers over your Blu-rays or 4Ks, you need to put them in plastic bags so the air doesn't get at them as quickly. All right. So there we go. You put it in a plastic bag and protect it. All right. So that's the four Chronicles of Riddick films. All right. The four Riddick films with the Warcraft Blu-ray DVD combo um, steelbook, and that's what I got off the second purchase off of Kijiji or Facebook Marketplace. And now we'll go to the two new things that I bought. All right. So the first thing I bought was the 2017 game for Nintendo Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. All right, which is basically Mario Kart 8. Now this one came out in 2017. Mario Kart 8 came out for the Switch in 2014. This is an updated version of it. They call it Deluxe because there's more, racetracks to go through. They added more stuff. They added more people that you can race with or whatever, right? So it's a fun game if you like racing games. It's one of the better games, and the more tracks and the more challenges you have, the better. So that's pretty cool. And I think there's an expansion pack to this as well, but I think you can only get it online, can't you? I'm not sure. Um, so, but I got this. This was the first game that I purchased for the new Nintendo Switch that I bought. And I bought this new off of Amazon, and it cost me, I think it was $69.99 plus tax. So it was like $70 probably to get this. All right. And when I look at this game used on Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji, it's $65, right? So the difference is minimal. So I bought it new, right? So why would I want to buy used for the same price? You know. So anyway, so it's a fun game. It's probably one of the better Nintendo Switch games. All right. And my son and I have a lot of fun playing it. All right. So that's Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. All right. And the last thing I bought, and the last for this video, is The Quiet Man from Eureka. So this is part of their Masters of Cinema collection. This one is number 125, and I didn't have this one in my collection. So the pricing on Amazon went below $20, and I like to collect this series. And so whenever I find one of these, when it goes below $20, I'll pick it up, right? And this one was below $20, so I picked it up. It's basically a John Ford film, and it stars John Wayne. And it's basically kind of like a romantic comedy with John Wayne in it. So, um, and I think John Ford won Best Director for this film. All right, and Ford has won. How many Oscars did Ford win for directing? Like four, five, six, something like that. Anyways, he's a great director, one of the early great directors. A lot of his westerns and comedies and everything he touches is like gold almost, right? Um, so when I saw this for under 20, and it was part of the Masters of Cinema from Eureka, I said, I'll pick that up. All right, so I did, and I'll add it to the collection, and I'll watch it. Now, the thing with Eureka is they're a British label, and so a lot of the stuff is, if you see, it's not A, it's B. All right, so it means it's played in Europe, not in North America, right? So this actually won't play on my Blu-ray player. Um, so I will eventually, because I have like probably over 100 of these titles, of the Masters of Cinema titles. Um, I'll have to get a Region B Blu-ray player or a Region Free Blu-ray player, and play it. I'll try it to see if it might say, a lot of the times Blu-rays will say that they're Region B or whatever, but then they'll still play on a Region A Blu-ray player. So it's always good to check before, right? But I don't care. What I'll do is, if I when I really want to watch this, I'll just transfer it on my laptop, transfer it into an MKV file, and then I'll just watch it on my laptop, right? So, um, but it's one of Ford's greatest films, and it's called The Quiet Man. It stars John Wayne, Maureen O'Hara, Barry Fitzgerald, and Ward Bond, and Victor McLaglen. All right, and I haven't seen it, but uh, it's considered one of his great films. So, all right, so that is it. So two items I bought new. I bought a Nintendo Switch new, so I started buying games. So you're going to see more games in these videos, and a bunch of Blu-rays, DVDs, and some books. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing. I would appreciate it. And you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in my next video. And bye for now.